Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. We live in a world in which hardship and struggle are looked upon as the opposite of what should be sought out in life. Nobody really wants to face difficulties at any step along the way. This has been so ingrained in our minds that any suggestion otherwise is seen as a kind of threat. Everybody knows that this entire mindset is something of an illusion, but that doesn't stop them from desiring it nevertheless. It is unclear how long this has been the state of things. If we go back far enough in time, we would find that hardship and struggle were not necessarily viewed in such a negative light. They were so much a part of everyday life that either one accepted them or one was miserable. Of course, merely accepting them didn't mean that life wasn't miserable, but it did make things so that the struggle was a little bit easier to bear. As recent as the beginning of the Second World War, this was a fairly universal mindset. Many of the everyday comforts in life that we have come to expect and demand simply did not exist. There was no air conditioning or television. The computer wouldn't come about in a publicly accessible form for another half century. Computers were around, but not anywhere near as popular as they became a few years later. Plane travel was only for the wealthy. Most forms of modern medicine had not been created, so something as routine as a minor infection could be fatal. The basic actions required to get through everyday life were so strenuous that most people today would have thrown up their hands in despair. It was not the least bit unusual for some popular writer or speaker to praise the merits of undergoing struggle to get somewhere in life. The reason all those who suffered immeasurably during the war were able to get through it was that they were used to major difficulties before the war. Suffering and struggle were still considered to be necessities of life, and any life completely free of them was seen as missing something essential. The resounding theme of needing to prove one's mettle and to go through the college of hard knocks was not just a relic from the Bible and the dark ages of religion. It was a moral part of Western culture and integral to cultures everywhere else. To be without struggle as a fundamental experience of life was to live in a fairy tale bubble. But in the years since the war, this entire outlook gradually assumed the status of a necessary or even unnecessary evil. This is a direct result of the increasing preponderance of luxuries and essential comforts in our lives. At first, these came in the form of electronic and mechanical tools to make our lives easier. When digital technology took over by the end of the 20th century, the stage was set for automation and artificial forms of everything. As we became more accustomed to these things, we gradually came to regard them as a birthright. Living without any of them was a form of torture, and suffering of any sort was increasingly seen as a kind of curse. This seems to be the way things will go in the future. There is no sign of it abating, and certainly no desire to see things go back to the primitive times when we looked upon suffering as a hidden blessing. In all likelihood, any message to the contrary will be seen as both antiquated and downright evil. But again, this is not the way things have always been, and not necessarily the way things should be. This week's Parsha is called Ekev. That word means something on the order of on account of, or some such phrase that indicates some vague sense of cause and effect. It is simply one of the many words in an opening paragraph dealing with the general idea of following the teachings of the Torah, leading to a promise of all kinds of blessings. This is the theme of the entire Parsha, fluctuating between rewards for sticking with the program and punishments for going off program. It's one paragraph after another stressing this very point. The very word Ekev, meaning on account of, really tells us the story of the whole Parsha. It's all about rewards and punishments as a consequence for following or veering from the Torah. There is a rather long interlude in the middle of the Parsha that vividly displays the negative side of this equation. This interlude goes through the major moral collapses that the Israelites underwent in their epic journey from the Exodus to where they were at present. The Golden Calf episode figures strongly in this, especially as it immediately followed the giving of the Ten Commandments. The spies story also warrants mention here, being as it was the precursor to the Israelites having to wander the wilderness for an extra 39 years before they approached the Promised Land. These and other reminders of collective failures along the way serve as powerful messages that there was always severe consequences for any lapse in this all-or-nothing religion. Surrounding all that is the message from the opposite perspective. This is the endless promise of blessing if the rules are adhered to. While the rewards tend to be of the biblical motif, fruitfulness of flocks and harvests, many children, plentiful rain, and victory over enemies, they are by no means limited to these. The message is clear from the Torah that this reward system was meant to last for all time, regardless of how important the size of one's flock was. Prosperity is prosperity in whatever form it takes, and this was the clear promise if that path was taken. But even within the prosperity, there is a major word of caution. The message is repeated that the Israelites should not take any credit for their victories or their successes. This somewhat surprising chastising seems to be a warning for the future. This will happen. There will be prosperity and success, and they will take credit for it. This in and of itself is considered to be a sign of moral failure. No matter how much success they will see, it is imperative to recognize that the true and only source for their success is God. Anything else in this huge spiritual struggle is defeating the basic purpose. The entire goal of this epic experiment in human destiny was to gain the understanding that God is the singular source of all the ups and downs of life. To not realize this or to turn one's back from it is to lose sight of everything. Towards the beginning of the Parsha, we find a rather curious few verses that underscore this message and also zero in on the centrality of struggle in the whole process. These verses are not easy to imbibe, being as they run contrary to modern desires and expectations. Quote, "Remember the entire path which God led you these 40 years in the desert. He sent hardships to test you, to determine what is in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. He made life difficult for you, letting you go hungry, and then he fed you the manna, which neither you nor your ancestors had ever known. This was to teach you that it is not by bread alone that man lives, but by all that comes out of God's mouth." God led them on this 40-year journey to send them hardships. The purpose of the hardships was to test them. The test was whether or not they would keep the commandments. God led them through all kinds of difficulties, including hunger, and forcing them to rely on a strange food that they had no familiarity with. The ultimate goal was that final verse, to realize that life is not sustained by the food that goes in, but by what we hear from God. What are we to make of all this? God sent them on this wild goose chase of struggle to test what they were made of. Couldn't God have found this out without all the suffering? This is not only a question for those verses in the Bible. It applies to every one of us throughout our lives, whenever we sense that life is not fair or it is too harsh on us. We ask this question periodically through life. We may not ask it of God, but we ask it of whatever the vague power we deem responsible for our struggles. Why does it have to be this way? Couldn't things have been easy and I still would have been able to prove my mettle? The answer to this question, whether it be asked on God in the Bible or nothing in particular in the course of life, is that there has to be a struggle. The Torah is not making any great revelation here that we wouldn't have known otherwise. The fact is that everybody knows this in one way or another. All the Torah is doing is driving the point home. It is telling us in no uncertain terms that this is the way things have to be. We may not like it this way, and we may wish with all our hearts that it wasn't this way, but that doesn't change the hard facts of life. Without any struggle, it is impossible to ascertain what a person is truly made of. Even something as basic as hunger tells us something about ourselves. Hunger, for better or worse, is one of the most familiar human conditions. From time immemorial, along with thirst, it was the hallmark of suffering. It may not have had the drama of physical torture or the withering effects of disease, but it hit pretty much everybody at some point, and many people on a regular basis. It still does, as we all know. Even going a single day without feeling some signs of hunger was a relatively rare experience until recently. What did hunger do for us besides being a source of suffering? It taught us something about ourselves. It taught us that sometimes we cannot have everything we want when we want it. It taught us that we have to do without. These lessons cannot be learned in any other way, and they cannot be unlearned. A day without food or water teaches a person more about themselves than years of schooling. The lesson the Bible emphasizes in these verses is the test of knowing how strong was the commitment to keep the commandments. The suffering of hunger and thirst, of having to eat something that wasn't the normal fare to stay alive, was necessary to show each person how much they were willing to take before they gave up. This was not a theoretical question that could be guessed at or put to some sort of questionnaire. A person can only know something like this about themselves if they have been forced to go through an ordeal that puts their proverbial back against the wall. Only by going through a struggle does a person know that they are willing to go through a struggle to keep their commitments. Life is not a computer game that can always be reset. It is the real thing, and sometimes it has to be difficult. We may not want to hear this, and we may find it threatening to our current lifestyle, but life hasn't changed all that much. Without any pain, there is no gain. Shabbat Shalom.